Well, 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 look who got resurrected, not only in body, but in paint. Here's your look at the NECA Toys, Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives, the 2022 reissue Ultimate Jason. As a child, Tommy Jarvis did what many others died trying to do. He killed Jason Voorhees, the mass murderer who terrorized the residents of Crystal Lake. Years later, tormented by the fear that maybe Jason isn't really dead, Tommy and a friend make a fateful trip to Jason's grave. I really think if you wanted to send this guy to hell, you probably shouldn't have brought Horshack with you as your friend. Before we get a closer look at the reissue Jason Voorhees, specifically from the reissue of 2022, let's grab the tape measure and see how tall this figure stands. And I will also, over the course of this review, more likely in the beginning, be bringing in a couple of other Jasons from also Part 6, so you can see the differences between those figures and the accessories that come along with them. In the meantime, though, Jason stands about 7.5 inches in height, or the figure is going to be about 18.5 centimeters tall. So let's go ahead and slide over Jason from the 2022 release, and we'll start from this way, and I'll work our way across. Now, I do have a couple of other Jasons I can bring in for comparisons, the first one being from 2015. Maybe you can see there's some differences between the two, and then sandwiched right in the middle is the one I did also get from 2020, so it's only about 3 years prior, about 2 years prior at the time of the lot number was produced. The one in the middle, I think right away you can kind of see, and now again, this one was only 2 years earlier, does have a lot of lacking paint. More specifically, you can see a lot of it's been gone away completely on the pants, and the little marks that he would have had on his shirt, for example, in both the 2015 release and the 2022 release get omitted altogether with the 2020 release. And just before we jump over to the figure's accessories, I did, of course, want to bring back in the box. This would have been the box that came included, not tipping it over in the process. This would have been the box that came included with the 2022 release. It is really no different. In fact, if we backtrack as far back as 2015, it's exactly the same box. It's maybe a little bit darker here in the front of Jason's mask, and maybe I would say it's a little bit darker and more defined here in the tombstone. Other than that, I don't see really much difference at all between them. Now again, looking on the bottom of this, the more crucial thing to always look at is this is your lot number. It's located just above the barcode. It's a little obviously harder to do this when you're ordering it online, buying from places like eBay, for example, unless you're able to ask the seller, can you provide me the lot number? A lot of times you'll just not know exactly what this is. So it's always best to kind of pick this up in local stores because you can easily then spot the lot number, or you can also do what I always do, and I order this from Entertainment Earth, and as soon as it's hot off the truck, that's when I'm hot off to go over to their website. Horrible. And of course, that's from there. I always end up ordering it. Also, another box we can also bring in. This is the one again from 2020. So again, like this would have been 5-year difference between the two. And again, like this one here is the 2022 release. So again, just to show you guys the lot numbers between all the three, 15, 20, and 22. A bigger gap, obviously, between the bottom and the one in the middle by 5 years. Only really 2-year difference between this one and the one that we're looking at in this review. Just before, in fact, we actually look at the figure's accessories, I did want to bring in the insert that comes inside the box along with Jason Voorhees. Kind of like how he's entombed inside the cardboard box. He's actually entombed along with actually the bottom terrain. Like his casket would be essentially here. And you sort of have the foliage growing all around it. I like the way they've actually done this, because if you look at it, it actually is the dug up section. Like if you look at it from a depth standpoint, they've already dug down to the tomb. Obviously, it's just really reflective, but I suppose you probably could if you wanted to have this as a bottom and have your Jason Voorhees figure standing on top of it. I haven't yet used this method, but what I did do with displaying Jason, because after all, this guy does not include a casket. I think Billy the Kid from a McFarlane line of toys came included with like a little wooden crate that he was buried inside of. It actually was for a while a great serviceable option for being displayed with Jason. It's a little too small, but obviously if you want to have it displayed with Jason, that's a great outlet to go with if you can find a Billy the Kid for dirt cheap. I think it was Billy the Kid. Anyways, though, let's run through the gambit here, the buffet table of all the accessories that come included with Jason Voorhees. And while we are also doing this, what I'll do is I'll bring in all the other accessories that came included with the earlier reissues so you guys can see the differences between them. Some of them are notably better. Some of them are about the same. You'll kind of be a judge for yourself to see which ones are better or worse. First, slightly smaller, Jason Voorhees does get himself a tombstone. Etched into the stone, in this case it's actually plastic, but etched into it at least is Jason Voorhees' name. On the top, it always looked to me like a worm. I think it looks to be almost like a weed or a plant that's growing to the top, or initially was growing, and it has since died. I like the darker color that they've used here. It's a really dark gunmetal gray, but it's almost got like a slight bluish tint to it, and it does have some really nice texturing to it. Well, I did obviously want to bring in, so for this first one, we'll bring in this 2015 release. Not really much to see that's different. This one is a little bit darker. You can see around the outlined area where Jason's name is, where this one isn't as dark, but the colors are about the same. The big thing that's different, though, is when you look at then the 2020 release. I don't know, for one reason or another, NECA decided to go with a paler looking tombstone. It's much lighter gray, and you can clearly see it stands out like I was going to say like a sore thumb, but like a sore tombstone. These two are obviously much closer to one another, and considering the fact that the gap is as big between the two, like obviously this is 2015, this is the 2022, and yet this one is so closer in comparison for a year standpoint, and yet it's an inferior looking tombstone. I'm going to do my best to not get these all missorted. So he comes included with the tombstone. The figure also comes included with a knife. The knife itself, as you can see, has a nicely painted silver blade. Both the guard and the, well, I guess the hilt and handle, as you can see, is all molded here in black plastic. So I'm probably guessing that they've molded this in black, and then they've painted the blade in silver. Again, as always, we can bring in the ones we looked at before. So this one on this side is the 2015 release. This one here on this side is actually the one that came included with the 2020 release. Now, one thing, obviously, if I can get my blasted thumb out of the way, you can see there's a big difference. Not as much maybe between these two blades, but between the 2020 release and the 2022 release. Not only is the blade a lot shinier with the 20 release, but you can also see at the end of the handle, for one reason or another, they painted it silver, where all the other ones have still remained to be black. So there's one thing that you could say, if you preferred, I'd have to go back and really watch the movie again, like Twist My Rubber Arm. I don't know if it actually does have a little silver cap on the end of it. If it is the case, the 2020 release wins it by at least accuracy. But the other two have still the matching handles, and the blades are about the same between the two. The figure also comes included with this machete. I like the darker gunmetal gray. Again, in this case, it's a very dark gray that they've used for the blade. The little riveted points that sandwich the two halves of the handle of the sword, or the handle of the machete, together. You can see as well, been painted nicely in there in silver as well. And to bring back in the blades we looked at before, this one here is the 2015 release. This one here is the 2020 release. In funny enough cases, all three of them have completely different silvers that they've used for the blades. So like the one in the middle for the newest release is a very dark silver, or dark gunmetal. The one to the side is kind of more of a lighter silver. And this one here is a little bit darker, at least what I can see with my eyes. Maybe this one actually is a little shinier. The 2020 versus the 2015. Big differences, big jumps of color between all of them. And again, we'll go back to the accessories. I'll show you guys how that stores onto the figure, obviously, as well. The figure is also, this figure also comes included with the end of the post from the fence. In all the cases before, these two halves attach together. So there's a little peg right there. There's a little hole right there. And meet them in the middle, the two connect. This works actually the best when it comes to displaying it with the Jason figure, because you can then slide it into his hands. Yeah, don't worry, I'll show you guys in a second. But overall, it's a nice looking post. I have heard, obviously, the collectors have said, like some of them have had broken pegs. That's one of the things that can be a problem. I think, in fact, my retro cloth, part 6 Jason, had a peg that actually broke right here. And of course, then it becomes absolutely difficult, impossible even, to attach the two halves together. For this, of course, what I'll do is maybe I'll just take the top post, because obviously that's the thing that's the most crucial. Now, the one I just brought in is from 2015. The one I'm bringing in now is from 2020. See, again, like a big difference in color. This one from the 2015 release, the one to this side of what you're looking at right now, the darker black is clearly very much different than what the other colors we will be getting here for the 2022 and the 2020 releases. The 2020 release seems to have a little bit more brown to it. The one in the middle seems to have a little bit more of a silver finish. So again, very different with all three of them. And then lastly, the figure also comes included with his swappable hand, which is basically just a gloved hand. Again, we can bring in the one that came included for 2015, and while still hopefully holding and not dropping these, this is the one that came included with the 2020 release. The 2020 release maybe has the most discoloring. You can see there's a lot more brown, or even maybe like a stain of black there, right to the very top of the glove. The one here in the middle doesn't seem to have as much of it. The one on the end from 2015, again, has matching colors almost to that of the 2020 release. So those are all the accessories that come included with Jason. Now, as already mentioned, you can take those accessories as the case is before. You can bring his arms up, because obviously we want to get looking at his utility belt. Strange that Jason was walking around with a utility belt. What you can do is you can actually sheath the blade. Now, with the blade, there's these little... This is obviously the part that would have normally snapped around the handle, but I always find it helps just to kind of open these up a little bit. Then you can then take the knife, slide it down in place, and even when you try to fit this down, I even noticed with the other two Jasons, it never fits properly all the way in there. You may have to just wiggle a little bit more, but he has the means to store the knife. And of course, he does also have the means to store the machete. When you are putting the machete, I find it helps to kind of just bring his arm out a little bit, because then again, his arm's not going to get in the way. And then you just sheath the machete. But I noticed with this figure, and maybe it was also the case with the other two Jasons as well, it's really hard to sheath the machete. Which a lot of times actually, when it comes to displaying this particular Jason, I tend not to even sheath the machete, or even, I usually sheath the knife, but I don't tend to put the machete in there just because it's always a hard time to get it back out. Even right now, I'm having a hard time to fit the blade in there. And obviously I don't want that to break when I'm trying to remove it. So again, we just pry that off. Ooh, we didn't want to unmask Jason in the process. So he does have, again, the means to store the weapons, although the weapons are a little harder to actually get into his hands. Or get into the holsters. Speaking of his hands, which was the thing I was actually thinking about at the time, of course you can take yourself the fence post, just simply take the end of it, and you can see there's just a hole right through his hand. Just take the post, I've already done this a couple of times already, but twist it. If you try to force it in, there's a potential that you could bend it and then snap the plastic. But if you just twist it back and forth, eventually it will give in, and you can see it fits all the way through. And you can do, of course, the exact same thing then on the other side. Most of the time when it comes to displaying Jasons, I'm usually either doing machete. Oh no, did I just pop the end of that off? I think I did. I think I just popped the end of it off. I'll have to see if I know exactly where it is. It's just dropped to oh, it's right there. It's right there. Okay, good. This little end piece isn't necessarily broken, but it's prone to popping off a lot. You can see I've just popped that back into place. It's where the part of the fence also would have been removed from the main part of the fence, the post itself. And then you're just going to, again, simply slide the two together and connect them right in the middle by the post peg. There we go. You can have the figure displayed like that. The only thing that's always been missing when it comes to this release of Jason is I feel they could have included the little puddle with a few of the cards, one of which being the American Express card, which of course would have left then the entire audience saying, don't leave home without it. I think that would have been a nice touch that they could have included. Maybe at one point at some point we could possibly get ourselves an accessory set for part 6 Jason. Or just another accessory set altogether. And I think it would be fun to include the wooden casket, but then also the little pool that has the floating cards. Anyways, that's what Jason looks like with the, of course, the fence post in his hands. Usually the way I end up displaying the Jasons on the shelf, or again, I usually display them with the machete. Let's go ahead right now, just remove everything that we've done. Just put that to the side. Obviously for this, I also didn't want to have any of the accessories mixed up, because I've sort of got all the accessories in the front of me here. So getting a closer look now at Jason Voorhees, obviously there's going to be some notable changes between, I found at least, this figure and the ones we got before. Right away, we're going to jump right to the bringing in the other figures. So this one here, obviously this one in the middle is the 2022. This one here, in case you didn't already know, is the 2015. And this one right here is one from 2022. Right away, you can probably see that the masks, while still sharing the same mold, which is still one of the things I would critique the figure for, I think he needs to have a lot bigger and a more very obviously round mask than one that conforms the shape of his face. But with this one, I'm just going to hold these hopefully in my hand here. With this one actually is a more lighter beige. This one here, actually when you're looking at the two, has a little bit more of a brownish tint. But the one in the middle by far for me is the one that has the best mask. Just so happens it's the newest release. Now Jasons also do have obviously removable masks. So we can go ahead and remove this mask first. This one I did also want to remove. This was the one I still have to fix this. The little peg came free of the plastic on the side of the mask. So I'm just going to have to maybe glue that back into place. There again is the Jason mask from 2015. Obviously, we're going to look at the unmasked version of him. And then again, here's the Jason from 2020. There's the mask right there. And then the one in the middle, which again, I think is the best of the batch. The mask not only does look good, but it's nicely colored. The only thing, again, with this, let's go ahead and put the Jasons down because we're going to go back to looking at his face in a minute. The one thing I will say, though, about the Jason Voorhees is that the mask is never right. It really needs to be wide like this. I might even just try to maybe heat this a little bit with hot water, especially like this bottom section. It always conforms to his face. Jason from part 6 should really have a more stretched mask like this, but by the time you actually take the straps and you fit this over his head, it ends up always being the case that it fits around his face. Just to also show you the differences between the straps, this one being the 2015 release, has a little bit more of a matte finish strap. And this one here from the 2020 actually has more notably a brown strap, whereas this one actually is the more shinier black finish. So again, like the best mask by far is the one that we get here from 2022. So let's get a closer look now at Jason's. Now, the first one we did get from 2015, or the first one I have in my collection, I think may very well be the first Jason that we got from part 6, does have, again, like that sort of Moss Man looking head sculpt. You can still see there's the bone to the side. He sort of has now missing lips and a missing nose. But yeah, that's what Jason looks like in part 6, even though we really don't get the chance to see him really like this. Behind the scenes footage, of course, you can see what Jason would have looked like. But again, never in the movie do we really get the chance. He does have one ear. Well, I guess he does technically have ears on both the sides, so that's nothing really missing from that end of things. I did want to, though, bring in the one that we got here from 2020. And by far, for me, this was the thing that was the most disappointing about the figure. Where they would have had, say, for example, the off-coloring of the red, for example. You can kind of see more of it at the top of the bone here. The bone and the front of his face was, for me at least, looking very unfinished. Now, maybe the bone works a little bit better with the 2020 release, whereas this one would have had just all a green face. It looks more just like Moss Man right there, whereas this one actually does clearly look more like a skeleton. Okay, so those are the two Jasons. Let's go ahead and pick up the one here from 2022. And right away, I can say that there's a big difference between this one versus the one we got before. His face doesn't blend in, or at least the lips don't blend into the rest of the face, so it doesn't have... So like the top and the bottom of his lip, what's left of it at least, has at least a little bit more of a reddish tint to it. Whereas this Jason would have gone straight to bone white, and this Jason would have been, the original one would have been all in green instead. So I think the lips were handled a lot better. The eyes look a little clearer, at least one of them at least. And the bone on the top here does actually have still kind of settled blood. Now, it will maybe argue the point, if Jason's been buried even as long as he has, I don't know if blood would still be on the top of his head like this, but still, it brings in some much needed color. Because again, like looking at the three Jasons, this one from 2020 just looks like it's missing a lot of paint and a lot of care and a lot of detail. Where now the one in the middle, I think, again, looks the best of the batch. When it comes to his shirts, again, we're just going to hold the shirts up so you can see. I think the closest ones are honestly the ones from 2015 and the ones from 2022. The greens match about the same. The stains on the front of the shirts are also about the same. Departing, though, from that is the one that we got from 2020, which goes really with not only a more darker military green, but like all the additional stains that he would have had on the front of his shirt are gone completely altogether. Utility belts, all three of them are about the same. Like, this one does have, again, a little bit of a drier brush across it, so it brings a little more of the detail there. Whereas this one, from only 2 years earlier, got done away pretty much with all of the additional wash and just left behind. Now, this one looks a little cleaner, so you could use the argument, like if Jason just put on the belt for himself, like maybe like the pockets and stuff would look a little cleaner than what we get here. Again, like when we look at, let me just bring Jason's arm out of the way here. If you look at the holsters between all three of them to hold the knife, they all look to be the same. But if you look to the other side also as well, they've changed the way they hold the machete. The one from 2020, this one here to the far right, has more of a brown finish, more of a chestnut colored brown, whereas this one and this one are more of a dark black. The last thing I did want to bring to your attention, I want to apologize because I keep having to say 2015, 2022, and 2020. But then one last thing I did also want to bring to your attention is the way they've actually got the blood stained on the pants. Again, to look at them, 2020, 2022, I should say, and 2015 have the closest color and stains. For reasons, again, unknown, this one here from 2020 sort of faded the stains out. Not liking the look of that at all. So really, collectively, when you're looking at all the figures, there's things I like about the figures, like obviously when looking at, say, this one, the newest one at least. This Jason, for me, I think has, first of all, a better mask. I think it has a better painted head sculpt. And I think, like the one that we got from 2015, I think that I like the stains that they've also added to the shirt, which, again, for reasons unknown, they left it off altogether with the 2020 release. For the articulation here for Jason Voorhees, we're going to run through that right now. The head is obviously still sitting on that post, so nothing changes in that department. Head rotates all the way around. It looks up, it looks down, and you can also move it back and forth as well. Nothing, again, has been changed in those departments. So, like, if you were to pick up either one of these figures on either side of him, booked in on either side, the articulation on those figures would be exactly the same. Arms do hinge out, but with these arms, I still notice that they're tight, which I guess isn't a bad thing considering that the lower leg, at least this one leg, is really loose on my figure, which is a shame. The arms rotate all the way around still. You can hinge the elbow only by one hinge, but it allows at least the forearm to rotate back and forth, and you can take the hands and rotate them all the way around. The upper torso is on a ball joint, despite for the fact he does have a longer shirt. The legs do split out, so just be careful though if you have a machete tucked in there, or even the blade. But it looks to be, once again, that they're using ball hinge joints. The legs do split out. You can take the legs and move them forward. You can move them back. There's a swivel at the top of the thigh, a single hinge in the knee, which is very tight on this figure. Very tight. But you can rotate it back and forth. Again, I don't mind the fact that it's tight here. I just wish it wasn't as loose to the top of his thigh. And again, when it comes to his feet, I guess we really didn't have the chance to look at his feet. The feet here are definitely more of a, again, more of a military green. The shoes from the 2020 release are kind of more of a browner finish. And then the one that we got from the 2015 release seems the fadest of the three. The fadest? The fadest. All in all, again, like, some may say, like, it's not really worth picking up a reissue if there's not enough changes made to the figure. And sometimes even looking at some of these reissues that we have here on this channel, I'm going to go ahead and put Jason's mask back on his face. Looking at some of the reissues that we have looked at here on this channel, does not always buying new figures translate better looking figures. Sometimes it's also the case where we have looked at reissues where, honestly, like, the figures turned out to be almost a little worse. In a case like this for Jason Voorhees, while I still think there's room for improvement when it comes to the shaping of the mask, that might very well be something I could try to fix myself. Maybe, again, like heating in hot water just to kind of pry the mask out, because I really did want the mask to be more of a circular shape, not fitting around Jason's face. But even though, speaking of his face, to remove the mask, not only was he having a better hockey mask with the 2022 release, but even once you had him unmasked, I did think he had the best unmasked face sculpt of all the three figures that we used in the comparisons in this review, which is, again, is somewhat ironic considering we really don't see his face that much, not even much at all in the actual movie itself. I'm sure I say this every single time we look at a NECA reissue, but guys, reissues don't always equal better looking figures. Sometimes they do, other times they may not though. We have recently, in fact, looked at the Dream Warriors Freddy, and I use that one as the example where picking up a newer figure didn't necessarily make for a better looking Freddy. In fact, the black wash that they added across the plastic of his face took away a lot of the features that they took so much time and effort to sculpt in there in the first place. Where I thought in that example, in that circumstance, the earlier Freddy actually came out on top, being the better of the two figures. Jason, on the other hand, though, from part 6, hopefully, as you saw in this review, from head to toe, I think this is better. Obviously better than the 2020 release, and also considerably better than, or marginally better than, the 2015 release. What's still funny is between all the three figures that we looked at during this review, the 2015 and the 2022 look the closest in color scheme. And yet, the black sheep in the family, the sore thumb, if you will, the 2020 release, had really the one that had the weird-looking colors to it. Colors in cases, or cases in which it looked like the paint wasn't either finished on his face, and like some of the areas like his pants and his top were completely void of all the additional stainage that looked so good on the figure in the first place. As a little side note, I find it kind of funny, you may have already noticed it right now as the figure spins this around, but on the back of Jason's behind, he actually has a blood stain. I don't know why I needed to bring that all to your attention. Now I really have to go back and look at those other two Jasons to see if he actually had a same stain on the back of his body. Okay, here he comes right now. Okay, everybody got a good look. Okay, everybody got a good look at that. Not sure how a blood stain ends up on Jason's behind. Maybe he just sat down on a bench after he massacred a whole bunch of teenagers. Either way, though, this Jason, again, from head to toe, is a better looking Jason, in my opinion. Now, my opinion, again, take it with a grain of salt. I'm only the guy that's reviewing these videos and recording these videos, after all. But you guys can be a judge for yourself of the three Jasons that we looked at in this review. What do you think is the best looking Jason? In fact, if you guys would like to have a little fun with this, let me know down below in the comments section. Break down the component pieces of the figure, like his accessories, like his mask, like his underface, for example. Which figure did you think handled it better? 2015's, 2020's, or 2022's? I'm sure somewhere in between those years that we looked at, I didn't go crazy every single time a new reissue struck, But, you know, of the 3 that we looked at, and there's probably a couple of reissues that were somewhere in the middle of that. I can't get every single one of them. I say that, and I'm probably going to be finding another Jason Voorhees popping up shortly. Speaking, though, of popping up, if you guys are interested and you would like to get your hands on this one, again, it's always hard to get the new lot numbers because unless you can find these in the wild and you can look just above the barcode to tell you right away the year of distribution of that particular figure, buying it on eBay is probably not a good idea unless you can maybe ask the seller to tell you what the lot number is. Or what you can also do is what I find is the easiest, head on over to places like Entertainment Earth. Entertainment Earth, without fail, has a hot off the truck option. So say, for example, you type in Jason Voorhees, which is what I tend to do sometimes with both Jasons and Freddy's. When you get the search results, there'll be a little box in the top corner of the picture that will actually say hot off the truck, and it'll tell you the exact date that it got re-inventoried over on their site. I think with Jason, it probably was like late June that the hot off the truck option was available. And knowing already that the latest Jason that I had already in my collection was from 2020, I knew there must have been a chance that this guy would have been a reissue and not simply just we had more stock of this. This is what NECA's saying, by the way. And we just shipped it to all our online sellers. But yeah, if you guys are interested and would like to get this one for yourself, I'll provide the link down below that will take you on over to Entertainment Earth's website. What do you guys think of this figure? Let me know down below in the comments section. And as well, if you guys enjoyed this video, want to hit with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing, and you love the fact that we actually look at reissues here on this channel, my wallet doesn't think as much of that. But if you guys are enjoying it, that's all that matters. But if you guys like this video, want to hit with a like. But if you guys are loving the content, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and that you're also turning on the bell notification. More NECA stuff heading your way. So as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.